Well, welcome back. A recent Fox News poll shows inflation is the #1 issue for voters right now, with over 90% saying that they are concerned about inflation. That same poll finds nearly 80% say that the condition of the economy is only fair or poor. Joining me right now is the 2024 presidential candidate, former South Carolina governor, and former UN ambassador, Nikki Haley. Ambassador, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks so much, Maria.
Well, congratulations on your move in the polls. Obviously, people are recognizing your plans as they are fearful about the economy. You're about to deliver an economic speech in Manchester, New Hampshire, later this morning. Can you tell us what you want to communicate and your vision for the economy right now?
Well, Maria, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an accountant. And so I know the importance of economic strength. And the way that you get economic strength is not doing what Joe Biden has done, which has sent us down this rabbit hole of socialism. All that does is dole out money and so in efforts to go and have government control your lives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to strengthen the middle class again. Socialism makes the wealthy more wealthy and makes the poor more poor. What we want to do is strengthen the middle class. And the way we're going to do that is first focus on how we can put more money in their pocket. Let's cut their income taxes and condense the brackets of the income taxes so that they can get more money. Let's eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax so that inflation's not burdening them so much. And let's focus on getting rid of any distorted tax rules that play favorites, like the state and local tax deduction, which it only takes from low tax states, but it gives to the wealthy in big tax states. And let's make sure that we put those small business tax cuts and make them permanent. They made the corporate tax cuts permanent, but they didn't do it for small businesses. Small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. Once we get that cash back into the pockets of our middle class, then let's focus on inflation, debt, and spending. And when we do that, we'll talk about ways of getting that down, and then we will go to economic freedom. How do we go and free us up? Let's reduce the programs at the federal government. Let's send it down to the states. That way you're reducing the size of the federal government and you're strengthening the people on the ground. We've got multiple plans to do this. We're really excited. And the strength of an good economic policy is a strong dollar and a strong middle class.
Well, and this is all national security, I would argue. Economic security is national security. But, you know, I'm glad you mentioned making the federal government smaller, because I think one of the strengths, if you will, of the Trump presidency was what he did around regulation. You know, you can talk about tax and spend, which are really important, but when you have this big brother telling corporations, telling individuals that there are new rules to follow, it handicaps them. CEOs and managers of businesses do not have the vision, and they won't put new money to work in CapEx and in all sorts of investments. And right now, you've got SEC Chairman Gary Gensler doing closed-door meetings, ensuring that he's got all his SEC rules in place for the climate change agenda, Nikki. So what are you going to do about this climate change agenda that is forcing corporate America to identify what their risks are for climate change and pay up for it?
Well, we're going to pull back the $500 billion in green subsidies that Biden has put in place. We're going to make sure we're energy dominant and stop demonizing producers. We're going to pass the RAINS Act, which Kat Kamek and Rand Paul have put in place. And basically, it would say any rule or regulation that costs the taxpayers more than $100 million, Congress needs to vote up or down on it. We're going to start putting things in place that really give the taxpayers control, not special interests, but the taxpayers. And when we do that, that's when we're going to start to see that economic strength.
Well, you also made a comment to me in one of our interviews a couple of months ago, and I just thought it was so spot on. It was about E-Verify, right? I mean, look, we just saw 10,000 people come through the border on Wednesday alone. This border is out of control. I thought your idea about E-Verify was one of the best ideas. Can you walk us through it, and are you still committed to that?
Absolutely. I passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country when I was governor of South Carolina, and we did an E-Verify. What we want to do to stop this bleeding at the border is to make sure that we go and do a national E-Verify, where companies have to prove that everyone they hire is here legally. Let's make sure we defund sanctuary cities once and for all. Let's put 25,000 more Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job, Maria, because right now they're not being allowed to do it. Let's stop catch and release, and let's go to catch and deport. And let's go back to the Remain in Mexico policy. The idea that 5.5 million illegal immigrants have crossed that border is a dereliction of duty by Joe Biden. It's unconscionable that he would put Americans at risk this way. And we've got to put an end to it. And he's not going to be able to do this anymore. Kamala Harris isn't going to be able to do this anymore. What happened at Eagle Pass is irresponsible. You had 10,000 people come to a community of 30,000. How are they supposed to even handle that? It's a safety issue.
Well, it's unbelievable, actually. By the way, you just mentioned Kamala Harris. The other day on CNN, she says she's perfectly ready to take over should Joe Biden step down.
Well, I mean, the plan of the Democrats is Joe Biden's going to win this election and then hand it over to Kamala. That's why a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris. That's who I'm running against, is Kamala Harris. And if you think she's going to take care of the border, she was the border czar. Look at what she's done. Now Biden's put her in charge of gun violence. There's no telling how the freedom she's going to want to take away from us. She was supposed to be in charge of artificial intelligence. Every other country has handled it but us. We can't afford Kamala Harris. And I have said it over and over again. The thought of Kamala Harris as president of the United States, we will lose our country. We can't let that happen. That's why we have to have a new generational leader that goes into the primary and comes out of the general a winner.
Well, we are all watching an economy and a country that is in decline. I don't think there's any secret about that at this point, Ambassador. These last 2.5 years have hurt the American people under Joe Biden. But you've got great ideas. At the end of the day, nothing gets done if the government is shut down, if we have run out of money. And that is where we find ourselves today. So what's your advice to the Republicans right now who are fighting? You've got one guy, Matt Gaetz, trying to take out Kevin McCarthy. You've got somebody else saying, no, we're not going to sign anything if there's any money attached to Ukraine. You've got others who are saying, I don't care what we cut, we got to cut. What do they do?
Well, first of all, Maria, Congress has one main job, and that is to produce a budget on time. Do you know Congress has only produced 4 budgets on time in 40 years? That's a disservice to the taxpayer. Do we need to cut spending? We absolutely need to cut spending. Do they need to figure out how? They absolutely need to figure out how. But I'll tell you the way the taxpayers can figure out how. It's why we need term limits in Congress. No more of dealing with these shutdowns. Cut the spending, cut the debt, stop the borrowing, and let's get things back on track. That's what I'm going to do when I'm your president. We're going to change the tone from the top down. You don't get to talk about things. You have to do things for the American people. We're tired of watching the back and forth and not seeing any action to go along with it.
Well, we definitely need term limits. I agree with that. But I asked Joni Ernst about that the other day, and she said not only do we need term limits for the elected officials, we need term limits for the staff, because there is something called the deep state and the swamp that is real. Do you agree with that, that others around the elected officials should have term limits as well?
Absolutely. And what I've proposed is that all federal bureaucrats should never sit in a position for longer than 5 years. We should rotate them. That makes for a better employee, and it also keeps us from having any power fiefdoms in any of those agencies. That's how we'll clean that out.
You're right. All right. Next week is hugely important for you, Nikki. We are less than a week away from the second GOP debate hosted by Fox Business right here. We are all going to be watching. A brand new Fox Business poll shows support for you doubling in Iowa, putting you in the top 3 now in your home state of South Carolina. 18% of Republican primary voters say that you are their preference. That's second behind Donald Trump at 46%. Tell us your plans. How are you preparing for this debate next week? What are you going to do?
Well, I've done 85 events in New Hampshire and Iowa, not counting the events we've done in South Carolina. And I will tell you, the town halls where we let them ask any question, we stay there, we shake every hand. I'm the last person to leave. That's the best debate prep you can get, because they pepper you with questions all the time, and you get to listen to what they care about, and I get to give them the solutions I want to put forward. And so I love debates. It's a great opportunity for the American people to see what their options are. And, we look forward to another one.
Yeah, that is great. Well, tell me this. The other day I was reading that you said Donald Trump is weak in the knees. Weak in the knees is not how most people would look at Donald Trump, given his toughness and bravado that we've seen over the last couple of years. Why is he weak in the knees, Nikki?
Well, look, I think he was the right president at the right time. I agree with a lot of his policies. I don't think he's the right president to go forward. He was strong when it came to foreign policy, and we've watched him get weak on Ukraine. We've watched the fact that he wants to go and just allow Russia to eat up Ukraine. That's not something we want to see. He had multiple spending issues. I mean, the reason we're in all this debt is we had $8 trillion under his watch. I think that he wasn't strong enough on what we needed to do to get our economic situation in place. I think he was incredibly strong when it came to trade with China, but he missed all the opportunities to really get that infiltration out of China, whether it's the fentanyl flow, whether it's the fact that they, are stealing our intellectual property, the idea that they're now putting a spy center up in Cuba. There was too much that China was allowed to get away with, and now Putin's trying to get away with the same thing. We need an America that's strong, and I think he got weak in the knees on that. There were things he was strong on, but there were things that I think he could have been a lot stronger on.
Well, I know that you were really tough on China when you were UN ambassador. You were incredibly impressive there, and I know you have a handle on that issue. But let me get your take as this final question on Ukraine, because, look, you've got congressmen right now saying, I am not going to sign one piece of legislation. No way. If any money, more money is committed to Ukraine. We've already said, $113 billion? How much can we spend further in Ukraine? Is this like unlimited?
Well, first of all, I don't think you should ever give straight up cash to any country. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition they need with our allies. But the way we have to look at this is America can never be so arrogant, Maria, that we don't think we need friends. Here was a freedom-loving, pro-American country that was invaded. What we have done, the money that you're talking about, is only 3.5% of our defense budget. If you look at percentage of GDP, the 11 European countries have done more than us. That's a small price to pay to know we are preventing war. I'm the wife of a combat veteran. I don't want our military to go to war. Putin has said once he takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries, and that would put us at war. We are trying to prevent war. 3.5%, let's be realistic about it. I would much rather Congress realize you're letting all these special interests get these things. You're not cutting spending. You're not cutting the debt. You're letting inflation get out of control. There's a lot of things you could be paying attention on. Leave our national security alone. Let us go and continue to prevent war, and you work on the economic strength of Middle America.
Well, let me tell you, it's going to be a lot of areas that we're worried about war. We've got Chinese nationals flowing into the wide open border right now, up 1,100% year over year. And I spoke with the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee the other day, Mark Green, who said, yeah, that's all directed by Xi Jinping. He wants to put these people in place so when he's ready to turn the guns on America, he's got saboteurs in place just in case we decide to stop him from going into Taiwan. Are we about to go to war with China as well?
Well, it's the reason why Ukraine needs to win. There's no one that wants America and the West to help Ukraine more than the Taiwanese, because they know that if the Ukrainians defeat Russia, then China won't go into Taiwan. That's why a win for Russia is a win for China, and everybody needs to remember that. When it comes to China, they have already infiltrated our country, whether it's buying up our land, whether it's buying the largest pork producer in the country, stealing our intellectual property, all of those things. But they've killed more Americans with fentanyl than the Iraqis Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. They know exactly what they're doing. They're doing this with the spy center in Cuba. They're doing it with police centers around our country. They're doing it with Chinese coming in. They're doing it with the fact that 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese. So if you got upset with the Chinese spy balloon, think about all these mini spy balloons. We need to start being strong with China and make sure they know that we're on to them. Republican and Democrat presidents for too long thought that if they were nice to China, that China would want to be like us. That's narcissistic. China doesn't want to be like us. They want to be a communist China.
Yeah, ridiculous that the U.S. would be buying drones and things like that from China. I mean, it's just so absurd. Nikki Haley, Ambassador, it's wonderful to have you this morning. We'll be watching you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Go to NikkiHaley.com and join our fight.
You got it. You can watch the second Republican debate right here on Fox Business, September 27th, moderated by our own Stuart Varney of Fox News' Dana Perino and Univision's Ilya Calderon. We'll be right back.